Welcome to the Exposing Scientology podcast. I'm Christie Rinder, and I will be your host today. As some of you know, my husband Mike is bravely fighting cancer. He is still adjusting to his new treatment, and so I am filling in today. I could never replace Mike, but I will do my best today. I am excited to introduce our guest today, who's a personal friend of ours, Brendan Tighe. Welcome, Brendan.
Hi there.
Brendan grew up in Scientology. He was a Sea Org member in the Office of Special Affairs and in security at the Flag Service Org. Something that we both have in common, I think if I'm correct, is that you were born into Scientology. Is that right, Brendan?
That is very correct.
Yep.
1,000% correct.
Okay, so we were both born into Scientology. We both were Sea Org members as children. How old were you when you started in the Sea Org?
Started in the cadet org when I was 5 years old, and then a full-fledged Sea Org member when I was 12.
Wow. So what was it like being in the cadet org?
Honestly, from cadet org to being like doing what's called the EPF, the Estates Project Force, and becoming a full-fledged Sea Org member, there was practically no difference, but I don't know, $30 more pay, and that was about it. As a cadet, we were just another asset to get lots of production done. Schoolwork was the lowest priority possible. Every week, it seemed we were put on a different project to either catch up on thousands of boxes of filing or dig trenches to help out plumbers.
You were digging trenches as a child.
Oh yeah. Here's 100 shovels and here's 100 kids. Dig a hole. Yeah. It was so normal that it's fun to think about how relaxed of an upbringing my children have now.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally get that.
Yeah.
I would say it's a healthier upbringing, wouldn't you, for your children?
Oh, well, yeah, without a doubt. They could be playing and then they choose to switch gears and be like, oh, can we help you, Dad? Can we help you, Mom? Can we do the dishes? Can we take out the trash? It's, I know different households have different, chore schedules or whatever, but it's, for me, my heart grows every time my kids choose to stop playing and asked to help around the house. It's a whole different vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you started in the cadet org at age 5, and is that because your mother decided to join the Sea Org? Is that what happened at that point?
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of background mess, but basically my parents were both staff at Boston Org. My dad was in all kinds of ethics trouble with Scientology. I didn't even know that was happening at the time. And he was sent to England for ethics handling and correction. And I honestly, as a child, had no idea that my dad was in England. And my mom was plucked from Boston Org to be an executive in the Sea Org. And that's how that all started. So for about 2 years, from 5 to 7 years old, I hardly saw my dad.
Wow.
And I didn't know why. Yeah.
And what organization did your mom join?
She got put straight into WISE International, which is the org that oversees Scientology businesses.
Right.
And within a few short months, she was the commanding officer of WISE International.
Oh my goodness.
Which is a huge, which, in the world of Scientology is a huge bump in responsibility from a little, small organization to this international based organization. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So she joins the Sea Org, and how did she kind of explain to you, or how were you sort of sent to the cadet org? What was that process like for you?
So it's complicated because there were so many lies told, and me and my sister, who, was 4 at the time, we both kind of knew they were lies, but they were told in a fairy tale kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
We were trained on what are called shore stories from a very early age. Concepts of it's okay to lie for the greater good. Of course, the word lie was never really used, but tell a half truth. There was various euphemisms for telling a lie for a quote unquote good purpose. So my mom and dad, a year or two before, had gone to a family wedding in California, which had nothing to do with Scientology or moving in the Sea Org or ethics trouble or anything to do with any of that. And they told the whole family that the reason that my mom was moving to California was because they had such a good time at the wedding and they loved California so much that they were moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, which was total unbelievable BS.
Right.
And we shared that story forever. And my mom sold me and my sister on moving to California because we would be able to go to Disneyland all the time. That was like, for me, the whole flight. That's the one thing I remember with absolute clarity is we're going to Disneyland.
Oh my God.
And the shocking truth was when I got to California for like a week, we slept on the floor of another Sea Org couple's apartment and didn't see our mom, hardly for a few weeks because she was on the EPF, the Estates Project Force, like the training group for Sea Org members.
Yep.
Anyway, so it was obviously a complete alteration of what we were told was going to happen.
Seriously, sleeping on the floor versus let's go to Disneyland.
Yeah. We didn't go to Disneyland for like 3 or 4 years. Anyway.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So how long were you a cadet? How many years were you a cadet? 7 years? Is that
I'm gonna put a disclaimer here. During the time that I was in the cadet org, they constantly recategorized and redefined what a cadet meant. But no matter what your status was as a cadet, if you were a Sea Org member going to Sea Org school, you were under the charge of the cadet org, plain and simple.
Okay.
And the reason I mention that is because at one point, if you were under 10 years old, you were called a pre-cadet. And then they constantly threw that rule in and out. And so some people could be like, no, it's not true. He was a pre-cadet. And like, that's beside the point. And,
Yeah, totally. So when I was a Sea Org member in Los Angeles, I had to go to school on the weekends, and I was a teenager. I was 16. And
let me just jump in and say it was a total joke.
That's what I was going to say.
I was there with you. I mean, you were a little older than me, but I was there. It was a free for all. It was like, chain smoking cigarettes, and it was one teacher, I believe, against like 200 kids.
There was no school at all whatsoever in this environment. We hung out. We sat in a course room, which is their term for a classroom, while he kind of stared off in space, randomly picked a book off the shelf, pretended to be reading Mission Earth. Mission Earth is not any kind of education. There was no curriculum. There was no program. There was nothing. And this was a pretend, in my experience, right? This was a pretend thing that we were supposedly at school just to follow a rule that says kids under the age of 18 need to be in school, but there wasn't any school happening. Is that, right? That's your experience too?
Without a doubt. It's almost hard to exaggerate how bad it was, because you can literally say any story about, you could bring up The Breakfast Club or any like crazy 80s over the top high school movie, and this topped that like by a long shot.
Oh my God. The Breakfast Club would have been fun.
Yeah. Like, I remember watching The Breakfast Club with a lot of people that I went to school with, my teen years, and we were just laughing because it was like, this is so tame. This is so tame. Anyway, yeah. And that was 6 people to one guy, one teacher. This was like, again, this was like somewhere between 150 to 200, yeah.
Yeah, we were shipped up there. So you were probably a cadet at the time. I was a Sea Org member already, and we were shipped up there on buses on the weekend, unless you had a friend who had a car, and so then you'd drive in your friend's car. I mean, who knows if you'd even show up there? You could go somewhere else. Nobody really supervised us. Right. There wasn't any schooling happening.
Well, the loophole to not showing up, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. The loophole to not showing up was the research checklist. Yeah.
Okay, what was that?
The research course.
You were doing research?
You can literally fill the blank on any subject you wanted to research.
Right.
So you could be like, I want to research karate, and like go, and like me and a bunch of friends would literally go and like play around on the mats at the top of the parking structure. Yeah. Where they had that, that random gym at the top of the parking structure.
Yeah. No, I do remember doing that too. I think one time we just went to a random library and just hung out in the library and
The
did nothing.
library close to the HGB, the Holly,
Yes, that's right.
the close to the management building in Hollywood was
Yep.
that awesome library. And yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing about it is when you think about it, so we're children, we're under the age of 18, we're working. I was working all day, Monday through Friday, 9 to midnight, and then on the weekend pretending to go to school. This
Yep.
is our life as young children,
Mm-hmm.
young teenagers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, keep in mind, this is directly related, which
Mm-hmm.
is I was literally 12 years old
Mm-hmm.
in my Sea Org classroom, and the teacher, which was Jerry Owens,
Yep, I remember.
who happened to be the teacher who usually taught the young Sea Org members, which is what we were referred to. The whole category of us that had to go to school was young Sea Org members. And the recruiter from OSA walked up to him and asked who she could take. And he literally pointed at me. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why he pointed at me. And he probably had his own reasons and I had my own reasons. But I wasn't even joking. I like looked panicked and I was like pointing at 3 other people that I thought were better options. And they were like, no, you. And they pulled me out and sent me straight to the EPF.
Wow. So that's how you started working at the Office of Special Affairs. You were just literally plucked out of a bunch.
Yeah. Like they didn't ask me which org do you want to go to, which org do you think you're a better fit for. They didn't interview me on my skills or nothing. I got told later on, like 2 or 3 months later, that I think it's if I get her name wrong, I apologize. She had a different name at the time. I think it's Kristen Caetano.
Yep.
Right.
That's how I remember her, Kristen Caetano.
Okay. I was 12. I think she was like 17, 18 at the time. But the point is there was this young lady who had been in OSA for like 4 or 5 years already. And she was considered like this screaming success story of a Sea Org member, especially in OSA. And because of my mom's credentials and my stepdad's credentials, who were both pretty high up executives, my stepdad, he was in OSA Int for a long time. And he was, Tom Paquette, and he was well regarded. He worked with Heber Gents closely for years. Mm-hmm. And surely Mike knows him really well. Yep. I know he does. Over the coming weeks, me and like 4 or 5 other people, most of whom I remember by name, Travis McCarthy, Sheldon Hogarth, whose parents were also like pretty high up executives, QC Strom, Quentin Christopher Strom, who is Kathy True's son. We were all picked because we appeared on paper to be like the squeakiest, cleanest male versions of clonable Kristen Caetano or whatever her name is. Yeah. And so like we were told, like, you're basically a science project to re-perfect this previous success. And anyway.
So what post were you assigned to in the Office of Special Affairs when you first started?
I did a few months as an expediter, which is just basically the Sea Org's version of a gopher, just do this, do that. And I laugh about this and Mike and I have, laughed about this a few times over the years, but quite a few times I was sent, as a 12-year-old down Hollywood Boulevard to get his and other executives' favorite carrot and orange juice or something like that, like fresh squeezed at some random booth. Yeah. Total safety concerns, the whole time. I had my little pepper spray in my hand, nervously twitching. Anyway, because there were a few alleyways to go down. That involved lots of random filing, and like I helped out in the recruitment office. Mm-hmm. And then after a few months of that, I got put as the legal computer input in charge. Okay. And that was interesting.
So just in a nutshell, what did that require of you? What were you supposed to do?
This is the fairly early days of computers, like in a what we know now is computers. So lots and lots and lots of scanning of like endless legal documents. Yeah. And keep in mind, like this is about a year or less before the quote unquote big IRS victory. Yeah. So it was like mountains of legal documents every day that I had to scan and collate, and basically with like very relatively primitive computers, I had to pick out all the keywords on a lot of legal documents and make sure everything was readable and, searchable on a computer.
Yeah. Did you stay on that post or did you get moved around?
I was on that for a little under a year. After about a year, I became the legal copy compilations in charge. And so basically all my experience in OSA besides Expediter was in the legal division or legal bureau, because only fancy words there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at all like the random sideline stories in my head. But basically, my job was to keep trying my best to summarize this. But basically, in every deposition or any legal proceeding, everybody involved needs to get their copies on both sides, right? Both parties. And so on average, I had to make like 10 or so collated, stapled, tabbed, whatever legal documents and get them distributed to all the proper people.
And you're like 13 years old while you're doing this, right?
13, 14.
I just want to remind the audience, you're 13 years
old. And because there were so many arbitrary inside of Scientology organization deadlines, like Thursday before 2, there would be like in other words, we would be like running to the courthouse, me and I wish I could remember his last name right now, and Mike would surely know who I'm talking about, but Charlie. Trust me, there was a relatively well-known Charlie in OSA. Everybody knows Charlie. I think he's still in OSA to this day. He was when I left in 2011. So anyway, Charlie would, get me to race with him to the courthouse in downtown LA while he double parked, and me, 13, 14-year-old would go running in courthouse to hand these documents to whoever, 1:59 p.m. or whatever.
Right. So let's explain that to people. So in Scientology, there's every week, the week ends on Thursday before 2. So statistics are kept every single week. Every little busybody member in the Sea Org member has a statistic. So Brendan had a statistic and he had to report it at the end of the week. And if it was up or down, this would determine his status as a good person or a bad person in the Sea Org. And so everybody would run and act crazy on Thursday before 2 to get their final tasks completed, to get their statistics up right at that point in time, because we lived and died by whether our statistics were good or not in the Sea Org.
Exactly. And one of the fun facts about these particular crazy moments is, even though theoretically, and I honestly couldn't tell you right this minute, that the racing into the courthouse with that stuff had anything to do with my personal stats, what was constantly put on my 13 and 14-year-old shoulders is that the statistics of the entire bureau, the entire division, were on my shoulders. So like I could literally let the entire, I believe at the time there was like 100 people in that bureau. Like I was letting everyone down if I didn't get that delivered on time.
Right. Yeah. Some photocopies delivered. I mean, I'm just talking it down.
Oh yeah,
from this perspective now, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay. And while you were in OSA, Mike was the head of OSA, Mike Rinder.
Yeah, I mean his literal position and name changed, but he was always the head. Like like there was title changes and power switches, but he was 100% the head of OSA.
Right.
Like,
and
without a doubt.
How many years were you in OSA?
2 to 2.5 years. Yeah.
Okay. And what was it like working under Mike?
Well, so first of all, I always risk sounding like I'm overly devout to Mike and all that. And I don't care. I'll say it right here now. Like, I will defend this man till the day I die. And that goes all the way back to when I was in OSA, because I don't really want to delve into like every horror story or like mistreatment, because quite frankly, people listening to this already know the average horror story and mistreatment of someone like me or you or child or elderly or whatever in the Sea Org and Scientology. Like all those stories are out there. And so I think it's more useful to be specific about, a good thing that happened on occasion. So the thing that's like ironclad in my brain is, my just general dislike of being an OSA, because from the day I stepped foot in there, I was treated by the average OSA staff member, and certainly my direct seniors, my bosses, as I may as well have been treated like I had a PhD. And if I didn't use my PhD, every waking moment, I was an idiot. Like, that's literally how you're treated. Like, hey, smartest person in the world, you're a moron. Like, what?
Yeah.
So there we are at this one staff meeting, which is a weekly affair. And Mike, was running the staff meeting like he often did. He and a few other executives said, if there's any, as they always said at the beginning of every staff meeting, if there's anything you don't understand, please raise your hand and, clear it up, because shouldn't go by any misunderstoods. And of course, this was just said, and nobody really ever bothered to raise their hand if they didn't understand something. So I was the one idiot who dared to raise my hand in the middle of staff meeting to clarify something. And I got hundreds of just dirty looks. And I had people next to me telling me to shut the fuck up. Why are you interrupting the CO? Mike Rinder.
CO is commanding officer.
Commanding officer, yep.
Yep.
I believe I'm quite certain that at the time he was the commanding officer versus the watchdog committee chairman. And all that's just confusing terminology, but basically one runs one and one runs the other. Like, they're both super duper executives.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they're kind of, repetitive, but Mike can chime in on that whenever he wants to. Anyway, the thing is that Mike literally calmed everyone down, and I'm not going to say what the subject was because it'll just trigger too many people. But basically, he goes, whoa, everybody. He's like, until 2 weeks ago, I didn't even know what that meant. And I'm telling you, I've never seen to this day an audience calm down and switch gears like that. Like, he's like, so who here is going to volunteer to clear that up for Brendan? And I mean, obviously so many volunteers, right? And anyway, it just, like, that for me, like, I just have to say, the reason why I always hold that up as something that I consider to be Mike's true character is, anybody who's been in the Sea Org knows no Sea Org executive had to take the moment to do that.
Right.
That moment, they could have just continued to yell, shut the fuck up.
Right.
It could have been a knockdown brawl. I could have been like teased for weeks, but no, like, I was in the Sea Org for 18 years after that. And I never, ever, ever was even once defended even slightly like that. Like, nothing even came close.
Wow.
Like, and I had much more psychotic experiences after that. Like,
yeah.
So anyway, that for me is the thing, that whenever, craziness is going down one way or the other, and people are telling me this or that about Mike, I'm like, you don't know the real Mike. You don't know the real Mike. You just don't.
Yeah. That's such a nice story. Thanks for sharing that, Brendan.
Of course.
Mike's not perfect, and he admits that, but he does have some very good qualities about him, doesn't he?
Well, without a doubt. And, I have these type of conversations all the time. I've told you about them here and there. Again, I'm not going to name names with who, because serves no purpose. But my thing isn't to defend Mike. My thing is to just be like, well, this is my experience. So cool.
Yeah, sure.
And anytime I hear about somebody else's experience, most of the time, and with few exceptions, I'm hearing about indirect experiences, especially indirect experiences when he was running OSA. And that to me is everything, because that moment, that staff meeting was able to happen because he didn't have David Miscavige or somebody else senior to him yelling in his ear, telling him, shut that fucking kid up. Like, right. like in other words, this is not a sympathy call. This is just simply you just don't know until you're there. That's all I can say.
Yeah. I mean, we all, and all of us have, I can probably say, and you can probably say, moments that we're not proud of and moments that we are proud of. And,
without a doubt.
So, and I know Mike has those as well.
Well, I'll just flash forward, and again, without getting into specifics, I had so many moments of shame of when I was in security. Like, the stuff that I did, that I wasn't brave enough to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
Absolutely ashamed. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens that you eventually wind up in security at Flag and you're no longer in OSA?
So by now, both my mom and my stepdad, not at the same time, but by now they've both been promoted to int.
Okay.
So like they're at the secret base. I'm literally left alone with no guardian in Los Angeles for over 2 years.
How old were you?
Um, well, my stepdad left to int when I was 11 and a half or 12, just right around the time that I went into OSA.
Okay.
He went up to int.
Mm-hmm.
And then like I think he was already gone by the time I finished the EPF.
So just to recap for those who are listening, you're a 12-year-old child. You're in the Sea Org. You're in the
Mm-hmm.
Office of Special Affairs. You have no guardians around really taking care of you. Your parents are going to the international base, which is in a totally different location, like 2 or 3 hours away. And
Yes.
you're basically treated like a full-grown adult. And you don't really have anyone you can go to if you're having a bad day or you need a cuddle like a 12-year-old sometimes needs. I
Yeah.
have a 12-year-old
Yeah.
right now. This is insane. Like, I just want to point
It's
out,
so
this is
funny that you say
insane.
cuddle, because like the last thing on my mind as a 12-year-old was cuddling, you know?
Of course,
Uh,
but I mean, 12
yeah.
years old is still a child. You're a kid. You're a kid, and your parents are nowhere near, nowhere around, and you're treated like a full-blown. That's the thing about Sea Org members. You're an adult, no matter what age you are, and you're expected, like you said, to operate in 100% capacity. There's no bad days. There's no like you need help or anything, except that one time maybe when Mike helped you. But you know what I mean? The point
Yeah,
that I'm
totally.
making here.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and again, that was really just to show the psychosis of the Sea Org is what that really encapsulates, you know?
Yeah. So your
Um,
parents go to the
there,
imp base, and
yeah,
you're 12.
yeah, I'm 12. You know, there's so many back streets and so many side stories to this, but the straight scoop is I'm abandoned in Los Angeles. I'm living in a
Mm-hmm.
dormitory with, okay, I'm going to say it was 150 square feet with 12 other people. Yeah. So,
And the 12 other people are all different ages, all right? Like,
yeah,
or
I'm sorry. I have to correct the record to be exact. There were 12 beds in 150 square feet. There were 4 3 high bunk beds. There you go.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, I lived in
And
the same types of dorms. I hear
and
you.
and these were people from, again, my age, 13, 12, 13, 14, to 60, 70 years old.
Yeah,
Like I never even I couldn't even tell you how old some of the people were.
right.
Like, yeah.
All mixed together, all created equally, even though we're
Yes.
not equal.
Right. So with that in mind, my mom and my stepdad again are at end. I have to do a side story because this involves my stepdad just before I left OSA.
Sure, go for it.
So the IRS victory event happened in October of 1993. Me and 3 or 4 of the other young kids that were recruited into OSA, me and Sheldon and QC and Travis, we all kind of banded together routinely. By the way, I remembered another name of somebody, Philippe Pedersen. He was the other recruit. We were all straight out of the cadet org. Anyway, we were all together at the IS event. We all had our tuxedos because everybody was required to wear a tuxedo or a super duper suit. Right when Miscavige acknowledges OSA Int for all of its hard work, the somebody apparently leans into a microphone in the audience, like they had a bunch of hidden microphones, for audience reactions, and said, clear as day, over Miscavige talking, "Yep, that's us," right? And let me tell you, we were interviewed like we were in an FBI confession booth or CIA, confession, grilled over and over again, individually and as a group, whatever. And they pulled my stepdad down from int on like a special mission to find out who said, "Yep, that's us," into the microphone.
Oh my God.
And I even said, because, after hours of grilling, I said, like, there's a possibility that I was proud and was like, "Yep, that's us." But I didn't know there was a microphone. I was like, is it bad that I said those words? That I
Oh
like,
my
I'm
God.
like, I don't know, like maybe everybody in OSA in the audience said it. Like I literally was like, I have no idea. But it was such a big deal because Miscavige and, Golden Air Productions and the audiovisual part of Sea Org, whatever, they take sound quality very serious.
Right.
It's like the most serious thing ever, which is laughable. But
So I
anyway,
assume they didn't like it because also it sort of took the limelight away from Miscavige and what he's saying, and kind of interrupts him and throws a little interjection into it and kind of messes up his immaculate speech.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the hundreds of times I was made to watch that event since then, I always have bad flashbacks.
Yeah.
So of being grilled for the stupid,
Yeah.
soundbite. Of course, always comes back to money. Money will always be brought up. Do you know how much money it costs to fix this audio?
Oh,
Like, no. Why would I know that? But anyway, I know it's rhetorical. So, so the point is that as much as I actually really liked my stepdad, that was kind of the beginning of the end for me in OSA. Because following on the heels of that, which was not related to my stepdad, was Miscavige gifted I 5 brand new like Hondas to OSA, right? And
Wow.
and because they were gifts from Miscavige, they had to be cleaned daily to Hubbard's exact instructions,
Oh my God.
sheepskin and lamb this and whatever boofs or whatever they're called to polish the cars. And because even though I had a post, I was expendable and I was constantly sent to clean the cars in the parking lot across the street from the management building, in that
Yep.
weird parking lot where people disappeared to Int, if you know what I'm
Yes.
talking about.
Yes, I do.
Yep. The vanishing point. So that's where we cleaned the cars, and it was me and sometimes Charlie, because Charlie used the cars a lot. And of course, Charlie, just going back to Charlie in our courthouse delivery days, he loved it because, of course, he had to drive this POS Volvo forever. And this was fantastic to not have to drive a stick shift in LA. So there you go.
Yeah.
So there were so few legal documents coming in now that there weren't thousands of IRS cases that I was basically like had so much time on my hands. But they don't ever treat you like that. Like they just yell at you to be productive when there's no production to do. So what happens after these huge things is they basically go around to find out like which staff aren't needed anymore.
Right.
Utilization surveys.
Yes.
Right.
Utilization
So
survey.
my stepdad was sent down from frickin' Int, from CMO Int, right? The top dogs, to do a mission at OSA Int to do utilization surveys. Yes.
Basically, they go around and interview all the staff to see how busy they are, what they're doing. There's various questions they get asked so they can find staff who aren't really being utilized and then take them from wherever they are and reassign them somewhere else where they will be better utilized.
Yes. So I had like a weird aha moment because not only was it a utilization mission, it was a qualifications mission. And the first qualification for OSA Int is that you have to want to be there. And so I just decided to be a pouty child or teenager or whatever, and just looked my stepdad straight in the eyes and just repeatedly said for weeks at a time, no matter how much they tried to get me to change my mind, I said, I don't want to be here. And I just told him, I want to be in Renos. I want to be this. I want to be that. And so because I now had this label of a petulant child, they took me around to different organizations.
Really?
And they took me to Bridge.
Like they shopped you around, or they actually posted you?
They shot me
Okay.
around. They dressed me up and shot me
Wow.
around. Because also keep in mind they were trying to do personnel trades, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So like they're like,
So they
we'll give
used you as a coin.
yeah, I was a coin. So we'll give you 6 of our, undesirables for 3 of your best, that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
Anyway, so I just kept repeating what I wanted, what I wanted, what I wanted, and it was just so funny because everywhere they took me, like I said, they brought me to Bridge Publications, they brought me to CLO West US, they brought me to OSA West US, and so on and so on. and I help, and all these different random, acronyms or whatever they're called.
Mm-hmm.
And
Different organizations that do different
right?
silly little things that aren't
Yeah.
really that important.
Right. And because everybody saw on my folder that I was a petulant child, they said, no, we don't want him. And so, strangely enough, I ultimately got what I wanted, and I ended up in the Renos organization.
Okay.
I had good times there and I had bad times there.
Yeah.
But strangely enough, the bad times were way worse than OSA.
Really?
I almost cut my fingers off twice.
Oh, God, Brendan. Oh, yeah.
And
The safety measures here in the renovations orgs. So the renovations orgs are the organizations that renovate different buildings of Scientology. And they have, regular people who aren't general contractors, who aren't really trained, who don't really have any special skills, just people off the street, just anybody thrown in to do renovations. And they just have to sort of figure it out as they go and learn it. And these kind of accidents happen, and safety measures were very poor.
And not only that, because Scientology now had religious exemption, there were so lax on building permits and stuff like that. Like, what churches are allowed to get away with in terms of construction is very different than residential and commercial and so on.
Right.
Yeah, it was very different. And it was the Wild West. Like, it really was. So the thing is that the first time I almost cut one of my digits off was at like 3 a.m. And keep in mind, I'm 14 years old, maybe barely 15, if that.
What equipment were you using at 14 years old?
An angle grinder.
Oh my God.
Yep.
And what kind of training did you have on using an angle grinder? I don't even know what an angle grinder is, Brendan. What is that?
Oh, it is a anywhere from 4 to 8 inch rotating metal or grinding blade.
Yeah.
That, spins at, I believe, 100 to 200 RPMs or maybe more.
What is it cutting?
Metal? Sheet metal. It's
metal.
cutting
Okay,
ducting.
it's cutting metal. Right.
Yeah.
Ducting. So you're using this machine at 14. Did you say it was 3 a.m?
Yeah, 3 a.m, because I want to just tell you about the incident itself, and then I'll tell you the reason we were there.
Okay.
So my senior, and I don't remember his last name, his name was Dale. He was an Iraq war veteran who had severe PTSD. And he was one of those people who, as far as I know, read Dianetics in the Army or something like that, and left the Army and immediately joined the Sea Org with no other Scientology experience. And that's always an odd thing to be around when you're someone who's been born and raised in Scientology. I wish I could explain the exact sensation of being in that position. It's very, very odd. Your interpretations of Scientology are just wildly different.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so his thing, when I cut, my finger was just basically barely holding on. And I may be exaggerating, but I mean, I went down to the bone, bad. I have a really bad scar to this day.
Oh, God.
And yeah. And so he was just yelling at me, get up, soldier, kind of thing. So it was this weird mix of military and Scientology Sea Org executives. It was an amazing mix, a whole bunch of PTSD. I literally threw duct tape over my finger and kept working, kind of thing,
Oh my God, Brendan.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
Awful.
Yeah. It took 6 months to heal, for real.
Oh.
It was horrible. So the thing is that Los Angeles org, right, which is
wait, just before you go on, you're 14. You have this terrible injury on your finger using an angle grinder at 3 a.m. These are the kind of things that child labor laws were created for. Am I right?
You're right. But the Sea Org excuse is forthcoming. Statement is forthcoming.
You're a religious volunteer, so therefore nothing matters. You can do anything at any time of day. Doesn't matter. You can be any age. Hiding behind religious policies that they had to allow these things to happen.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Okay, so carry on.
That, by the way, was when I said it, when I was experiencing worse than OSA, is in OSA, they at least were smart enough to pretend to care about child safety and labor laws.
Right. Because they're connected to
there were many times that I was working late and somebody was like, you need to get out of here. you're underage.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there was just as many times where that wasn't the case, you know, but like I never heard that stuff when I was in renovations. It was just like, you're able-bodied, here we go. Like,
yeah, the inconsistencies of things like that in the Sea Org were ever present. So, you know, today it matters, tomorrow it doesn't, because we have an urgent project that has to get done, even while you're in OSA.
Absolutely. And so the reason that I was there at 3 a.m. was because just before I had joined the Renovations Organization, they had completed all the central, like major central ducting for this new LA org building. And this kind of strangely ties into OSA, which is that two of the floors, the third and fourth floor of what are now the Los Angeles organization, were part of OSA, because OSA did not have enough space at the management building. And in my last few months before I left OSA, they were given another floor, and so all of OSA moved out of the big blue building into the management building in Hollywood. And so now Los Angeles org had more space to expand into, and they could basically shuffle around their offices and classrooms and whatever to accommodate the remodel. But the first major step that was done was the ducting, and that big, huge atrium reception was added at the backside of the Los Angeles org that faces Sunset Boulevard. I almost said Sunset Point because I'm in Florida, but Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
They accidentally installed a bunch of sheet metal that was rotted out, that had a bunch of rust and other issues. So the ducting that had just been installed was deteriorating rapidly. Just like in the movies, like Die Hard and stuff like that, they needed someone small enough to go inside of all the ducting, someone small and lightweight enough to like lower down, because this was 3-story main chase that went from the basement to the top of the second floor. So we're talking about 30 feet of steel ducting with all kinds of, you know, shrapnel and, you know, sharp edges everywhere. And
oh my God.
So basically it was my job to go inside this huge shaft and cut out panel by panel and lower it down and replace it and stitch it in, basically section by section.
And you're 14?
Yes.
Okay.
Just before I turned 15, 14 and a half, 15. You know, I definitely wasn't 15 yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yep.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, that really kind of was pretty consistent throughout my renovation days. I mean, don't even get me started on the level of 100% confirmed asbestos contamination, asbestos exposure.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that wasn't exactly like unique to people in the Renos organization.
Right.
That was like all over the blue building. Like you could literally you could be walking through the back corridors where there was like exposed piping and there was just chunks of asbestos falling off.
Yeah.
You know, Jack Kruchko, who was the chief engineer, he was one of those guys who was a man's man, you know, real, I think Alaskan native, you know, like not native like Native American, but like a real lumberjack type, you know.
Right.
And he made a point of grabbing a chunk of asbestos and chewing on it, spitting it out.
Oh my God.
And
ridiculous.
I remember one time him and one other person, and this is 100% true. At one point they had partnered up with an Irish structural engineer group to add a bunch of hurricane protection walls throughout the blue building. And I was in a trench and someone had accidentally severed a gas line. And of course, it's the mid 90s, so everyone's smoking.
Yep.
You know, I was freaking out, but not like screaming or anything. I was like, can you guys please put your cigarettes out? And Jack made a point of throwing a cigarette down on the ground close to the gas line to make a point that the movies show gas explosions wrong. From that point forward, I'm like, I'm never going near you again. Like,
yeah, that's scary.
Basically, he was trying to say that the PSI, like the pressure of the gas, was too high for it to be in whatever form it needed to be immediately explosive. And I'm like, you know, you could have said those words and that would have sufficed rather than, you know,
throwing your cigarette into the mess.
Yeah.
Right.
And by the way, anyone listening, please don't do this science project at home. Like
no. Don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so at some point you wind up in security at Flag Service Org.
I didn't want to correct you in the introduction, but I'm going to do it now.
Yeah,
I
correct
tried.
me. Correct me.
We in security,
Correct me,
we were
please,
very
Brendan.
proud of the fact that we were not in the Flag Service Org. We were in
Okay,
the
so
Flag Land Base,
Flag
which
Land
was a
Base.
senior organization to the
Oh,
Flag.
yes.
Oh
These things matter.
yeah.
Okay, good.
But the funny part about it is that every bit of funding was from the Flag Service Org. Like,
Right. Yes.
like our paycheck said Flag Service Org. So
Okay.
whatever.
And you told me that you had some stories regarding Shelly Miscavige. Did these take place when you were in security?
Oh yeah, I did mention that. Okay, so of course I saw her many times, as as I saw Miscavige many times, but seeing and having interactions were very much not the same thing, at least for me.
Right.
Like, for example, just a random example, like I did security detail for Miscavige many times, but I wouldn't say we ever spoke.
But when you say you did security detail, what did that entail? What was your job? Just sort of to be around and look for any bad things that might happen in his vicinity?
Yeah, a lot of the time that was during like the international events. And then more intimately, it would be if he was having a meeting with a whole bunch of execs, especially if they were called in from around the world. And there was like a conference room, and there would be like security guards at like every fire escape, every exit, in and
Right.
out. These were usually top secret briefings about things to come.
Yeah.
And this kind of was a funny throwback to my IES event mishap when I was a kid, but basically I was there as a security guard when Miscavige, I would be like 20 feet from him when he would do, after the event, re-recording. He would be like, I think I stumbled here, or I think I had a lisp here. And he would do lots of re-recording,
Yeah. Right.
like for editing purposes. So like no audience, just rereading lines or whatever. I'm sure there's a term for that I'm not thinking of right now.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
So what were the stories about Shelly that you wanted to share?
One of the reasons I touched upon Miscavige is for most of those experiences, and honestly, if somebody were to ask me if it was all, I would probably say yes, which is Shelly was always there. Like that was like the one thing you could count on was you wouldn't ask like, oh, is Shelly going to be there? She was there.
Right.
Like, period.
Yep.
And so going back to when I was 14 years old, I believe it was like right at the end of my OSA days. So my mom and my stepdad are both int execs by now. And I don't think it's important to mention what their posts were, but they were int execs. And they were trying to get me to come to int. And I basically kept, in as politely as I could, I kept saying no. Like, I don't want to go to int.
Yeah.
I really don't. They tried to get me to go to the int ranch and all this kind of stuff. And I just was like, nope.
In your mind, what do you think the reason was? Did you kind of have a gut feeling of what it was like there and you didn't want to be part of that?
Honestly, it was because of how many times I saw people getting RPF'd.
Right. Tell people what that means, getting RPF.
The Rehabilitation Project Force, which is the equivalent to the
like a prison camp.
Prison labor force, corrective labor force for the Sea Org.
So you saw that happening as a young person and you didn't want to go there and have that happen to you.
Yeah, it was just, and I had friends who went to int who went up, they were high as a kite going up and crashed and burned.
Yep.
And I was just not for it. Yep. Plus my dad, and we haven't even touched upon him, and maybe it's for another interview, but
yeah, for sure.
My dad was not a Sea Org member. My dad was, in all the years, and again, I'm really not going to get into it right now, but my dad was the only one who ever came to my defense when I really needed it. He would try to stay back and bite his tongue, but if I said help, he freaking helped. He always there. Like, I didn't have to ask twice ever.
Yeah.
And so I knew I wouldn't have that connection. Like I hardly had it in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Right. Like I had to use that connection sparingly, but I still had the ability to go to a payphone if I wanted to.
Right.
there were still payphones in the big blue building.
Yeah.
In my mind, most famously at the top of the Rainbow Bridge at Asho. That was for me, the big oak phone booths. Those were my haven. Anyway, so my mom and my stepdad were constantly trying to wine and dine me. Like every few months, they would come into town and check on me, around, they would come down for events. This is kind of worth mentioning. They were both involved in the speech writing for the events and the production of the events. So they would both be there for the international events.
Mm-hmm.
And so when those events were happening, they would make a point of seeing me, and they would take me around to fancy restaurants, sometimes with Scientology celebrities, big donors, that kind of stuff. Like, it was a weird world I lived in.
Mm-hmm.
And one of these times happened to be New Year's. And so the New Year's events never happened on actual New Year's, right?
Yep.
They were pre-recorded. And so we were at the actual New Year's event, which all the Sea Org executives, like the real executives, Mike was probably there, Heber Gents was there, all the real executives at the time. And as far as I'm concerned, they were actual executives at the time, not just puppets.
Mm-hmm.
And Miscavige was there, Shelly was there, and my parents were there, and all kinds of execs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this was at the pavilion at Celebrity Center in Los Angeles, right?
Okay.
My mom and my stepdad kept taking me around. They brought me to Guillaume Lesev, the executive director international, and they had me chat with him and, have him like talk about my hopes and dreams. And, of course, like he reported to my parents that I was really glib. And then like I bumped shoulders with like Norman Starkey, who, I met quite a few times when I was a kid, and different executives and people I can't remember their names right now were there. I don't think there were any Scientology celebrities there. It was a Sea Org New Year's bash for int execs and their families. And so I was exhausted. I was just being doted around in this stupid little tuxedo, right? Which by now I owned because I needed a tuxedo so often in those days. And I'm not even being sarcastic. And so, so I go out back, right, to like the service entrance, right, where like all the food carts are coming in and stuff, and I'm just sitting back there in like the kind of half dark, and these two ladies come out to have a cigarette, right?
Yeah.
And I have no idea who they are, no idea at all, but they're, one's brunette, one's blonde, and they both just start talking to me, or they're talking amongst themselves. And they turn to me and they start asking me, the blonde, I believe Shelly was blonde at the time, she starts talking to me and asking me what I thought about the event. And and I just tell her, I don't know, like my guard was down, and I just start telling her how I thought it was boring, and like I got lost a few times, and I'm like a freaking 14-year-old just telling this adult who has like this motherly nature about her. Like, I have no idea what's going on.
You're telling her the truth.
I'm telling, and she just starts laughing her ass off, right?
Yeah.
And puts out her cigarette dramatically, and she's like, "Well, that was my husband you were talking about."
Oh my God.
And she kind of winks and walks away. She's like, "I won't tell anyone, don't worry." And then I'm like starting to have like that childhood panic attack right now. Like, I'm like, I don't know if I should feel relieved that I'm not dead, or if impending doom is still coming. I have no idea. And to this day, I don't think I've ever felt like I've had my tail tucked between my legs like that.
She had good humor in the moment. That was good. That was a good interaction you had with her.
Yeah. And I don't know, people could tell me they had much worse experiences.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because that is the type of experience that I compare to my staff meeting, with Mike.
Right.
Where I'm like, these moments where a person, for whatever reason, is being themselves or allowed to be themselves are the moments that, to me, speak the most,
For sure. And Mike has said to me many times that he felt that Shelly tempered Dave, and she was the one who kept him somewhat just tamer And when she and she could say things to him and she could try to bring some sense to him. And when she was sent off the lines, that was gone and there was really nobody who could say anything to him.
Right.
So your story kind of fits with that picture. She was a real person. She just laughed it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As an adult, like I'm talking about 20, 30, 40 years old. If I hadn't had that experience as a kid, I honestly wouldn't know one way or the other. I wouldn't. There was many times I saw her walking down a hall with him and, everything was very serious. And, there was lots of those, right? Lots of very serious moments, or where I was out of earshot and my back was turned, because as a security guard years later, if I was staring them down while I was on duty, I would be out of there in a minute, they would be like, who the fuck is this guy? Get him out of here.
Of course.
You're trained to look nowhere and everywhere all at once, right?
Mm-hmm.
So going forward, kind of like a medium ground, when I was in Renos, when I was in the Renovation Organization, after my air conditioning duct days, I actually kind of settled into a better position. I was the project manager, Mark Paisan, Paizo, right?
Yep.
That was his nickname.
Mm-hmm.
I was his communicator / secretary, assistant, whatever.
Okay.
And he kind of saw what was going on with me, the abuse that I was taking. And he just he had a meeting with my dad. It was actually pretty powerful. And he said, I'm taking this guy under my wings.
Wow.
So
that's nice.
Yeah. He had a heart. And so I became his assistant and had a better time there for about 9 months. That came to an abrupt end, no fault of his. I was just taken out of Renos and put into another organization. When we were doing ASHO, the American St. Hill Organization, which is the organization in the big blue building in the middle of the street, I was his assistant during most of that project. So when Miscavige would come into town for inspections, I was like the key runner, I had to run ahead and unlock everything ahead of them. That was my thing, right? Because one of the things you learn about Miscavige inspections is that everything needs to be secured, but also no doors can be locked by the time he gets there.
Right.
It's a weird dichotomy. So every door has to magically open.
Right.
So it was my job to make sure the doors magically open. And so I would be in earshot of a lot of these inspections. And one time Miscavige walked into one of the bathrooms, with Paizo and Shelly and one or two other people. I couldn't tell you who they were. And Miscavige just started yelling, "Get the fuck off of the floor," And Paizo, I could just see him at the doorway because he was standing halfway in, halfway out, and his heart just sank. He was like, "What the fuck? One of my plumbers or something is sleeping on the floor?" Or this is in the middle of the night, by the way.
Oh God.
And I could just, he told me the story later, but I could hear it. Shelly was just she's like, "Just stop," something like that, and basically Miscavige was just fucking with him. There was nobody on the floor.
So she was saying, "Just stop" to Dave.
Yeah. And she kind of slapped him on the shoulder, and
right.
That was how it was relayed to me, but I could hear it. Yeah. But
yeah, again, bringing a little bit of sanity to the insane.
Yeah.
That was Shelly.
Well, the thing about Miscavige is one of those people who maybe he thinks more of himself than he is, but in his
maybe,
but in those circles and those circumstances, he knows his power. He knows if Paizo had a heart issue, he probably would have had a heart attack.
Right.
That's the weight of that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Pardon my French. His words had way too much power. So those jokes just weren't as funny as they might seem to, between, blue collar workers.
Right.
It wasn't that, it was coming from way too much altitude.
Yeah. Agreed.
So,
totally.
Yeah. So then again, way flashing forward, and this is an indirect experience, is when I was in security at Flag, my wife at the time, we've obviously divorced. She's still in the Sea Org and I'm very much not. She and about 100 other people were interviewed directly, very surprisingly, by Shelly Miscavige. And I just remember the fiasco when Shelly Miscavige came into town I believe it was like 2004, 2005, by herself, without Miscavige, without her husband. And we and security, we didn't know what to do. Like, we were like, do we give her a security detail? Does she like? And she was just like, nope, I'm good. And of course, the security chief was like, all cameras on Shelly. He's like, I don't know why. We're just supposed to know where she is at all times. Right. It really did create quite a stir for us, because it had never happened before. It really, all the where's Shelly and all this stuff like that, like that amount of internal confusion was generated the moment she arrived without David, without her husband. I can't overstate how much of a shock factor it was.
Yeah.
And so to then find out that she had set up a conference room at the Coachman building at Flag, which is one of the main office buildings there, with a quote unquote dummy organization board. She basically pulled in 100, if not more, staff, including my, again, ex-wife, to interview them and tell them that they were slotted to go to INT, and that she was doing an allocation board. This was like a super urgent project, and And the weird part, and I don't know if she did this with anyone else, she let it slip in conversation to my ex-wife that David did not know she was there. I remember vividly my ex-wife, Katerina, telling me as soon as she got out of the interview, she's like, he doesn't know she's here. Like, I just remember like how shocked and excited she was, and that it was like a top secret hush hush project.
Right.
And I think not even 48 hours, she was like abruptly escorted to the airport by the local RTC reps. And as far as I know, that was the end of it.
Yeah, she was rogue, trying to fix things on her own, and he was not happy about that.
I just always find it fascinating, because I'm not one to like go on the internet and like search for answers or try to find something that agrees with something that I've experienced. And so every once in a while I hear these tidbits and I'm like, oh yeah. Like I'm like, oh,
that makes sense.
I thought I was the only one who knew that or heard that, or
right. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Brendan, we have so much more still to talk about, I believe. So I think that for my last few questions, I'm going to hold them for the next time.
Okay. Yeah.
Because
we kind of knew this was going to happen, right?
Yeah. But it's good, because there's so much to talk about. And I'm glad that we got to talk today. And we have just scratched the surface, I think. Don't you think?
Well, I'm just going to say it now to the casual listener. Christie has done an award-winning job of not letting me go off the deep end. Because my Irish roots have held me to the tradition of long storytelling. And I think that she reined me in pretty well.
Oh, well, you did great today. This was wonderful. And we got through a lot, but I think we have more to do. So let's hold the rest of this for next time. I'm going to stop here where we're at a good place. And thank you so much for coming here today, Brendan, and sharing your stories with us. I really appreciate it. It's been so good chatting with you.
Thank you. I want to do a huge shout out to my wife, Kelly, who is awesome and is so supportive. It's almost ridiculous. So
I love Kelly. Shout out to Kelly and the kids, and your whole family.
Too. Well, they're, they know where they stand. Yeah.
Yeah, no, you have a beautiful family, and let's talk more about that and sort of how things progressed next time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, buddy. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. You can find more episodes of Exposing Scientology wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to check out my best-selling book, A Billion Years, My Escape from a Life in the Highest Ranks of Scientology. It's available on Amazon, hardback, softback, and as an audiobook. Until next time, be well and happy.